Welcome to Vancity Beats, Eats, and More. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Vancity Beats, Eats, and More. My name is Kazi.
You go.
You go.
You go. I'm LeFan.
Yes, and this is someone biting me right now.
Captain Kirk.
El Capitan.
I'm Captain Kirk.
Yeah, so let's have a seat. That was us figuring out our intro, how we were going to do that. If you're tuning in with us for the very first time, this show is all about interviewing the music, the food, the creative art scene of so-called Vancouver, what is the ancestral and unceded lands of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations, what we colonially know as Vancouver BC, and what we love to call Vancity. And today on the show, it is a lovely, rainy Sunday afternoon in Vancouver. And I'm sitting with one of my dearest, closest friends, Vanessa, or V, or by her artist name, LeFan. And she is a multidisciplinary artist. She is also one of the most, multifaceted Scorpios in my life who literally does a million things. She's a musician, she plays flute, she sings, she plays guitar. She also does aerials, she does kung fu. She's like learning things with technology that I'll let her explain because I can't explain all the things. What else do you do, V?
I'm a dog mom.
Dog mom of Kirk. You've probably seen him. He has been our emotional support animal, our silent, what do we say this? Like a silent, guardian, silent wizard. This is a wizard trapped in a chorky Chihuahua Yorkie body. And this is his official dog mom. So if you've seen him on our show and our past episodes, this is who he belongs to. This is where he lives. And today I really want to talk to Vanessa about her creative journey, her artistic pursuits. I'm really inspired by all the things that she's done, but especially in this very specific moment in time in her life, I feel like she's really an artist in blossom. Someone who's really coming into her own, who is carving a very special lane and path for herself, and is just in this like very exploratory phase of just like learning so many different things and applying and experimenting. And I think that's a really exciting place to be as an artist, where you're not necessarily defined by one thing, but you're creating how it is that you want to express yourself. And yeah, going through the challenges of what that entails, to put yourself out there like that. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for making time and opening up your space so we could chat today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I've been wanting to be a guest for a while. I've seen a bunch, a big fan.
Yeah. You've been waiting. You're like,
waiting.
When are they going to ask me?
Let me talk for an hour.
Yes, let's talk for an hour. So let's start from the beginning. I could have read your bio, but I actually feel like it would be great if you just told us more about where you're from, where you were born, and how did that environment really inform your creative pursuits and you becoming an artist?
Okay, well, I was born in Taiwan, in a town called Ganyuan, which is in Shuling, which is in northern Taiwan, kind of in the Taipei County. Mm-hmm. It was a kind of like a farm town. Like my mom's family were generations of people tending farmland. And that's kind of where I grew up. When I was growing up, it was all like rice paddy fields around us. My grandma had this beautiful veggie garden. There was patches of bamboo plants that we would like harvest the bamboo shoots from. And yeah, that's where I spent most of my childhood, just riding my bikes, catching bugs, catching tadpoles, watching them turn to frogs, and a lot of nature, which is, I was very, very grateful for that. And how I kind of got into artistry, I guess. I started singing when I was really, really young. My mom sang in choir growing up.
She's a beautiful voice.
She does, yeah. My dad also sings. He used to sing lullabies to us every night before we slept. And so, yeah, like karaoke culture is also huge in both Filipino and Taiwanese culture. So I just grew up around people just singing as a form of expression and storytelling. So that's how I got into it. When I would sing in the car, and they're like, oh, like you have a nice voice. Let's just put you in choir. Oh, you sing, you should play guitar to play with your, like, song. So they just kind of like any little bit of interest I expressed in art forms, they were super supportive and excited and would just want to help facilitate that. So yeah, I joined different clubs at my school, or they would put me in like group classes and stuff. And I started like painting, drawing, doing music, going into dance and all the things.
I forgot to mention that too. Vanessa's an incredible painter.
Oh yeah, I paint.
Yeah.
Once every couple of years, I will pump out a painting.
But it's good. It's solid. Yeah. So then how old were you when you came here to Canada? And what was that transition to immigrating like?
I was 11 when I came here. So it was like the end of grade 5. What was happening was there's a lot of factors of why we moved here. One of the main reasons was that they didn't want my brother to go into like mandatory military conscription.
Which also happens in Taiwan at a certain age?
Yeah. It's like more lax now, where it's like quite short. It's kind of like a summer camp, but like historically it was like pretty intense, especially in the older generations. But yeah, they wanted us to also come here to be able to like go into the arts and do what we want, because Asia is very strict academically. So that was a big reason, but also because the farmlands that we were living amongst turned into factories. So industrialization really hit my hometown. So the land around us kind of got rented out into these like factories that were just polluting a lot, really noisy, and there was just always trucks going by. So
what were they industrializing? Like,
I'm not sure. I think parts of it was like fabric plants or something, because the dyes would go into the water. Yeah, there was the creek by my house that my mom said when she was growing up, there would be like fish and like shellfish and stuff that they would gather. When I was a kid, I really got to see it go from clear with some fish in it to just completely like dark purple, black water, completely polluted. Yeah, so that was a big factor of why we also moved. So I was 11 when I came here, and it was a weird transition. I moved to Maple Ridge, which is, if you don't know, it's a very white town.
White?
It's white.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of a culture shock coming here, especially because I was kind of from the countryside of Taiwan. So I didn't know anything about like pop culture. I was nerdy, had braces, straight bangs, glasses, just like wore my brother's clothes. I was not a cool, stylish kid. So that transition of like, making friends in North American culture was really difficult. Took me many years to figure out how to not be weird and blend in.
Oh, the assimilation that is required. Could you speak English yet at that point?
I could, because I was privileged. My parents knew that we were coming, so they had this like multi-year process of like making sure that we had English skills. Like it wasn't fluent, it wasn't proficient, because I wasn't living in an environment that required that. But yeah, we were watching a lot of like documentary films like David Attenborough. I love Animal Planet and Disney movies and stuff. And we had like English classes in there, and so I was conversational, but I think a lot of becoming fluent and knowing like the slang and pop culture terminology and just like little daily things took some time.
Yeah. Well, you know, from what I know about you, you've always been super active and involved in a lot of different activities. But at what point did you decide that like you felt this calling to be an artist, and you know, the lane in which you chose?
I don't think there was ever another. Oh no, that's not true. I was gonna say there's never another option, but my original plan as a kid was I'm gonna be like Steve Irwin. I wanted to do wildlife conservation and save wild animals, and that was.
Shout outs to Steve Irwin, for real.
He was a huge inspiration, and I loved animals. I had lots of pets and like farm animals growing up, so that was always something that I really wanted to do. And singing, dancing, painting was always like just a creative expression. I didn't really think of a career, but those are just things that I love doing. And I still wanted to do that even in my first year of university. I was in biology, and what really killed that dream for me was calculus. I failed biocalc so badly that I was like, this is not for me.
Is it necessary even in the career?
No, but you have to get like some kind of like science degree, and you have to math, I think.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm not cut out for this. Yeah. I was like, studying English, I was studying psychology. So being an artist as like an actual job path didn't really cross my mind until I was like 22. I went on a solo backpacking trip in Mexico, and I lost all my bank cards within the first 2 weeks. And this was like a one-way trip. So I had like a couple hundred pesos left on me, and I was like, okay, either I have to start withdrawing through other people, like transfer them money to like withdraw to get cash, or like somehow get a bank card sent to me. And neither sounded like a very good option. So I was like, I'll just start making money. So at the time, I befriended a lot of local musicians, and they're like, just come busk with us, come play on the street, play in the restaurant. So I started gigging with them, and that was feeding me and just keeping me in the hostel. And I was like, this is what people do. This is, there's people out here who just like play music and make a living. So for the rest of that trip, I was just kind of freelancing. I was playing music in hotels and bars. I got a gig painting murals on someone's boat in Bacolod.
Yes.
And that was trading me for like my room and food. And so that was the first time in my life where I was like, okay, I like lived full time for like 3 months doing this, and it's possible. So then when I came back to Vancouver, I started kind of plotting, like, how can I slowly make this transition and just do more and more art. And yeah, a few years later, I think this past year is the first year that I pretty much all my income was based in the arts.
Yeah.
And I'm paying rent.
That's right. And so tell us about the program that you're in and what you're studying.
I'm studying music and sound at SFU. And it's kind of a funny program because it's very experimental. It's one of those schools one of the only schools here that you don't need to learn jazz or classical to get in. You don't even have to play an instrument to get in. It's a lot about the exploration of different ways to make sound and different ways to compose with sound. So SFU has a long history of like electroacoustic music and field recordings. So that's kind of how I got into that. It's very experimental. So yeah, I kind of really changed the way that my practice is. And it's also a pretty interdisciplinary school. So there's like a lot of interaction with like theater students, and I have taken a lot of the theater production classes and stuff and made friends. And within those productions, I was like, oh, I can like do sound, but I can also do acting and do stage design. And yeah, kind of getting more and more into like that interdisciplinary work, which really fits with how I actually practice in my own work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you really explore a lot of different things. When I first met Vanessa, you had written songs. None of them were recorded yet. You were just playing them on your guitar for whenever there was like an opportunity to just play and share music, which is where I like learned about you and your talents. And then literally within that year, and that's funny because not a lot of people I feel like would do that, where, you know, they're just like kind of hobbyists of like making music, writing songs, but then you were just like, now I'm recording, now I'm working with musicians, now I've come out with this artwork for my album, and now I'm releasing my full-length album. It was just like, it happened so quickly, and that you were tapping into grants and things to make it all happen. And to me, that was super impressive, you know, and it took a lot of like resourcefulness and confidence. And so, yeah, your project, can you tell us about it, the album that you released?
Yeah, what holds us together? It seems like it happened fast, but it was actually a very slow burn. All of the songs in the album were written like years before. So I started that songwriting process in my early 20s. And over the course of like maybe 5 years, I was finished writing them, and then I had all these songs that I would play, and I wanted to record, and I didn't really know how. But through meeting musicians, like I met Rick, I met Tanya through Rick, and connecting with that community, I met Thomas through Tanya, and Thomas ended up becoming my producer.
Can you full name shout them out?
Buckman Co.
Yes.
Tanya Iganova.
Yes.
Thomas Holler.
Yes.
So I met Rick, who's Buckman Co., who had collaborations with Tanya Iganova. So then I started singing background vocals on both of their projects when they would play live shows. And then I did a live show with Tanya at the Museum of Anthropology, and Thomas was the guitar player of that show. So Thomas, his partner Ocean, and Josh and I ended up going to the NOM afterwards, and we had this like conversation about how he wants to start being a producer more, and I was like, I have songs I want to produce. So then from there we kind of started building this friendship and collaboration where I would show him my songs, and then we would start playing and arranging together. And over the course of 2 years, we brought in our musician friends, including Tanya and a bunch of other people, and made this project happen. But yeah, it took us 2 years, and a lot of learning, because it was like both of our first time making a full-length album. A lot of it was during COVID, and I actually didn't have any grant money to do that.
Okay.
I funded that whole thing myself. I applied for grants 3 different times and got rejected by all of them, so I just kind of like, whatever, I'm gonna do it anyway. The time felt right, and I had some savings saved up, and I was like, okay, let's just do this, and I got lots of like friends and family discounts from the people who played on it. So
and what's the album about?
oh yeah, right. Okay. So the album is titled What Holds Us Together, and it's the concept is a journey, so it was meant to be kind of a sonic but also like spiritual internal journey, reflecting on the themes of what do we share. Like, it starts off with this multilingual introduction of a soundscape and a spoken word piece that I wrote as an introduction of both my family lineages. So I walk through my dad's lineage, my mom's lineage, and then in English I talk about how I moved here and my life here on these stolen lands. And then it kind of unfolds into the rest of the album of like, okay, this is where I come from. We each have our individual contexts and experiences and where we come from in our ancestry and experience. When we share this world that we live in, what are the things that we actually have in common? And for me, it came down to the emotional experiences. We feel love, we feel pain, we feel sadness and joy, no matter who you are and where you come from. Those like physical emotions and sensations are a human experience. We grieve in similar ways, and we all are held by nature and the earth and the waterways that support us. So yeah, it's an exploration of those themes and the spirituality and like our essence as like spiritual beings. Our shells may different, the paths that we walk are different, but what are the elements that really connect us? And each song is kind of like a little different aspect of like navigating life with that lens.
Yeah, so well said. As you were saying it, I was really thinking about the album musically, and especially having heard it first as like early demos with just you and the guitar. What was that feeling like to have sonically those spaces filled and explored and expressed through other musicians coming on board?
Having other people come on board really solidified my belief in like community makes everything better. I think for so long I didn't record it because I felt the pressure of like having to do everything. Like, oh, I have to learn how to produce and play all these instruments. And then when I released that expectation of myself and just be like, no, there's people out there who love that, do that, and want to do that. Why not bring together like our different skills and assets rather than this like individualist way of I need to be the main like hero of this journey. I'm just a chip in this like bigger vision that like community can help fill in those gaps and like create something that I could never on my own. And that's what the work needs, and that's what the work wants. So yeah, it turned out way better than I could have ever imagined, and way better than I could have done on my own. I think because of how it brought all these amazing people together, and these are people that I admire deeply and I consider like mentors and teachers and pillars of the music scene here.
Who are they?
Oh, Latanya is a big one. Karina Keeling, Jessica Vira, Kin Balam, Richard Brown, Chris Kudo. I'm missing so many people.
Oh,
Ocean.
Jessica was on there?
Jessica, Karina, and other Jessica. Like Jessica Keeling and Jessica Vira did vocals on it. Marianne Chetta played keys on it. Sorry, I got excited. Just so many people offer their skills, talents, and voices.
Aw, so good. Can we just make the rest of the live stream a listening party now?
We could do it after.
We could do it after. So what are you working on now?
Well, Thomas and I just finished tracking the vocals of the next 5 songs that we did. So I'm working on an EP that's also a theater show and installation that is called Unsent Letters to Whom It May Concern.
And that is kind of based off of your residency you did at What Lab? Yeah, tell us about that.
So that whole thing was like kind of a part of the same brainchild project. It feels like an infant phase still. It's still like a growing creature of its own. But the concept is, so I'll give some context. I have a history in counseling. So after I did some schooling, I ended up getting a diploma in wellness counseling and life coaching. So mental health and different therapeutic methods are like a big part of my exploration. So I was trying to incorporate that into art because I feel like that was so foundational for me in my own healing and gaining of awareness of myself and like how I interface with the world. I wanted to create an artwork that kind of embodied that experience, but also like invited people into it. So Unsent Letters started out as this like batch of songs and poems that were just scattered across journals and notebooks that I had that I wasn't sure what to do with them, but they were like genuine processings of like relationships that I went through, difficult emotions in life. And I was like, okay, these were healing for me. And this practice of like writing and songwriting is so beneficial. It's almost like it really reminds me of like Gestalt therapy or empty chair theory, where you can process these emotions and experiences and stories you have with people without the presence of the other person. So it's more about your internal story of what happened and what you want to happen, and how do you complete that experience without needing to involve somebody else, because sometimes like the people that you want that conversation with aren't there. They're not, they either are like no longer in this world with us, or they're just not in a mental capacity that can actually show up for us that way. So how can we help ourselves through finding peace and resolution in those dynamics? And for me, like writing about it and then reading over the writing over and over again and over years, coming back and then realize that my perspective has shifted, and then editing the text. That whole process has really helped me in, finding peace in these relationships. So I took the songs, me and Thomas have been recording them, but I also built it into this theater show musical thing where the songs live in, because I'm like, I don't want to just record the songs, put them on Spotify or whatever. I want my art to take a new life form. So I wrote a musical for the songs to live in, where it's like monologues of these like texts and writings that I've done. I did sound design using feedback. Like feedback is something that I have been working with through my program at SFU. I love the sound of it, but I also find the concept of it really interesting, because feedback is the sound of, say, like a microphone and a speaker. It's usually an unwanted sound, which I feel like that represents emotions for me. So a lot of people feel intense emotions. They feel like it's out of control, therefore they want to shove it, get rid of it. And I feel like feedback in this context of like a concert is that thing that everybody hates and like people are trying to get rid of. But when you actually listen to it and know how to work with it, it's a really beautiful sine tony timbre. So I learned, I'm like exploring different ways to like make feedback controlled, pleasant, and also just work with it in a way that's really enjoyable.
I think you're the first person I've ever known to say that.
Really?
100%. Who else thinks about feedback like that?
There's
most
history.
people are like, how do we make it stop going? It's like, step back. Step away.
There's a long history of experimental musicians who work with feedback. And I was inspired by the work of, I'm going to forget his name. It's either, I think it's Steve Reich. I think. I could be wrong. But the piece is called Pendulum Music. And he puts speakers on the floor and then a row of microphones hanging. And people will like hold the microphones from far away and let them go. And as the microphones pass over the speakers, it would make these like weird tones. It doesn't sound good. Yeah. But I like the concept of it. Yeah. Because like it kind of, it makes these like random rhythms and tones of like boom, 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 boom. And as the microphones like get closer, it eventually just like, it flatlines. So I'm like, okay, that's like a really interesting way to compose with feedback as this thing that you can't really control, but you can work with it in a controlled environment.
Interesting.
So I did that with my aerial hoop.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I put my lav mics on the aerial hoop and I put speakers around it, so then when it spins, it does that same thing, but instead of pendulum, it's like in a circle. And then I run it through effects, and I was like, okay, this is my new instrument. And then I started, doing feedback with physical objects, because you can do the same thing with contact mics and transducers. So transducers are like the speaker without the cone. So it's like creates the vibration, that lobe. That's what the floors have, the transducers. So if you have a contact mic which picks up sound through objects and a transducer, that's the same thing as a microphone and a speaker in air. So I started doing that with like different objects. My favorite one so far is the pool table. Yeah. So that's what
she bought a mini pool table.
Tiny pool table. And I amplify the feedback inside the pool table.
Remember how I said she's going to explain some technology things? But that was it.
It's a simple mechanism, truly. But it's like...
I don't, like, but like, I don't know, my brain just doesn't think like that. And I love that your brain thought of all these things.
And it's like inspired by things that people
Yeah.
have already done. It's like, okay, how can I take that, make it my own?
And explore through
Yeah.
what you already do and create you literally create an instrument through your aerial hooping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, because now I'm like in my hoop, and then like the different spinning makes it sound different. If I hold it in a certain spot to get a certain tone, and then singing to that system and playing flute through it, it also kind of talks back to me. So I feel like it's like that relationship with my like inner world or like subconscious of like getting now to dialogue it in a way that feels safe and not like overblown.
So cool. So you did this in September.
Yeah.
And then your new project that you're working on is kind of building off of that, would you say?
The songs that were in that show in September are what I'm recording.
Got
so
it.
that was like the live version with all the monologues and the movement and all the like the little interactive stations. Now I'm just taking those songs and making studio recordings that I can do a digital release and make videos for.
Wow. Yeah. So out of this whole process, and maybe just like all the processes you've been in, as you've been creating art, what would you say has been the most challenging? What do you come up against?
Other than things being really expensive
Yeah.
and time consuming.
What do you struggle with or are challenged by as an artist and a creative?
Imposter syndrome. I think like the anxiety of like not feeling good enough, or like feeling like I'm falling short, I'm not honoring the idea, or I don't really quite know how to put it into words, but it's like that afraid of being seen, or afraid of, because I think like for me, because I do so many things, I don't feel like I actually excel at anything. I feel like in some ways there's certain things that I kind of bastardize, like I'm doing my best, but I'm not a master of any of my crafts. And I think that's something that I grapple with, like trying to give each element of my creative practice enough attention while being spread thin across all of them, and finding a place amongst that of like being okay with the ebb and flow of like, okay, sometimes I practice one thing a lot and then I didn't touch a paintbrush for 2 years, and being okay with that, or finding a way to balance it in a way that I still feel like myself. Because like there's certain things if I don't do, I just like feel squirrely, and my self-esteem gets not great.
Like what stuff are your foundational go-tos, I guess?
I think playing music is foundational. Like I sing every day just for sanity. I have since I was a kid. I think when I don't practice an instrument regularly, I start getting down on myself because then I can't perform the way that I want to. So I've been trying to be more consistent about my flute playing and guitar playing, so then when I have a show, I don't feel like a fraud or feel like I'm like not honoring the songs in the capacity that they want to be played at, because I'm like struggling technically.
Do you have any other kind of, I guess, grounding techniques or things that you'll tap into as your own inner resource when you come up against those feelings, which are so human, and like a lot of people I'm sure can really relate to those feelings as an artist?
I think like practice, like being just really acknowledging that when I feel that way, it's usually because I feel guilty knowing that I didn't practice in a way that I'm proud of. So I'm not presenting something that I'm proud of. But when I, prepare for a gig, and like this year I've been practicing like improvising on a flute way more than I ever have, which is new territory for me. And I think like being experimental means that you're always in new territory. So it's always a little uncomfortable, but that's also what kind of makes it like exciting and meaningful for me. So yeah, lately, like in my improvisation situations on a flute, in the past, it's super anxiety ridden and I can barely do it. But now that I've done it enough times and made it through okay, I can refer back to those moments of like, I already did that. I know I can do that. And getting out of my own way, because I feel like that fixation and anxiety actually makes it harder. When I can breathe and really relax and actually just trust my ears and really listen to what's going on in the moment, listen to the people that I'm playing with, and think less about exactly what I'm playing and just trusting that my body knows better, especially with something like the flute. I can't do that on a guitar. I'm not proficient enough on a guitar where I can just feel it and play it, but I think with my voice and flute, I'm slowly getting to a place where it feels more accessible to be able to just express and connect with the instrument and let things come out. And trusting that that's okay and enough.
Yes. So well said. Thanks, sis. What would you say really informs like you know, your ethics or your philosophies on art making and community engagement? You know, like since I've known you, you've been very passionate about the earth and like you know, what's going on our planet, and especially you giving that background of how you grew up and seeing firsthand how like your ancestral homeland was shifting right in front of you. Like, yeah, can you speak a little bit more on that?
What informs my ethics? Yeah.
You know, like how did you become an activist?
Activist is such a funny term to me because I don't identify as an activist. I feel like activism is like an act. It's not like an identity. It's not like I'm an activist now.
Oh my
I'm
God,
put that on my
tell them, let them know.
It's like activism is something that I do, and like it's not. Yeah, I think something that I constantly have to like, not like work at in like a capitalist like laboring kind of way, but like return to and stay grounded and then choose to do in moments where I feel called to. So I think I've always had like this deep passion and love for the earth from, you know, nature documentaries, but also like people, like I feel like I'm very empathetic, and that's how I got into counseling. I love people, and I genuinely believe that every living being deserves to thrive. And
it's our birthright.
It's our birthright to thrive, have water, have food, be safe, have shelter. And it really breaks my heart. And it's the injustice of the world. I don't know, I feel like we all have that responsibility, especially coming here, learning more about, you know, what colonialism has done to the land and indigenous communities, reflecting back on the histories of Taiwan, because my family is originally Chinese. It's a complicated history of my mom's family was from like southern China, so they're one of the original waves of settlers that went to Taiwan, and there was indigenous people there. So there was always friction and displacement amongst people coming from mainland China going into indigenous communities in Taiwan. But that happened about like 7 or 8 generations ago. My dad's family was first generation in Taiwan. They were Chinese, and both sides of my family lived through Japanese occupation and the brutal violence that had happened in that era. So I knew that imperialist colonial history through my family lines. And then during the Civil War with the Communist Party, my dad's family moved to Vietnam and Taiwan. So that displacement is also in my history. So then when I connect with that pain that's in my family and then see how it's been enacted to people here as well, to like a larger scale, it makes me feel a sense of like responsibility. You know, I'm privileged enough to be able to say whatever and be relatively safe here. I'm privileged enough to have a house and food and clean water, and that's not the case for so many people, even here. So recognizing that I have privilege, and there's responsibility that comes with that privilege, and like doing what I can, especially as somebody who benefits off the colonial structures here. I benefit from society. I'm like acknowledging my own hypocrisy in driving a gas car, and okay, I can have love for the world, but then deeply reflect on those like hypocrisies in my own existence.
Can you explain what it means to be responsible and like take responsibility as a settler on these stolen lands?
Yeah, I think I learned a lot at Fairy Creek, honestly. That was like my first step into activism. I think I like saw everything that was going on with old growth trees being logged, and I think that just really hit close to home, because that was the first time a huge direct action has happened in accessible distance to where I'm physically living. It was still like a ferry and a 3-hour drive away, but it was close enough that I could go there. So I felt really called that I just need to know what it's like to actually take action beyond just like thinking and talking. So I showed up on the front lines and I spent most of the summer there and did everything I could in a physical way, like hiking things in, myself into a hole, being arrested, and just doing what I can. And on the front lines and in that community, there was also a lot of discourse around settlers and Indigenous communities, and it wasn't a straightforward thing. And I learned a lot sitting in circles with Indigenous people and elders and just hearing their perspectives on what's going on, not just there, but in the greater context of these stolen lands. So what I learned a lot about was solidarity and community care, and to follow the lead of Indigenous people, Black and Brown people, who are still facing the brunt of colonial violence. So that was one way that I showed up, and from there I learned those principles, did a bunch of more reading. Actually, during 2020, when the Black Lives Matter wave happened, I also did a lot of reading and reflecting on like Black activists and writers. So I read a lot of those like anti-racist books and learned the framework, kind of did more firsthand like frontline work at Fairy Creek, and then also learning from folks like Tanya and people in the community, just like really listening and admitting that I don't know anything. I'm like so new to this work. I'm like the baby activist, like really I'm like learning that activism is like when I'm actually doing something. I can't just like do that one thing one time and then start to be like, I'm an activist now, like, you know. Yeah, just like learning like really embodied work and knowing that it's a lifelong process. It's a commitment that I make to showing up when I'm called in ways that I can. And now with what's going on with Palestine and Israel, I'm like, okay, what are Palestinian people asking us to do? What are the Indigenous people standing in solidarity with Palestinian people asking us to do? And like showing up at those events, listening, learning, reading, educating, and just like doing what I can in my own little corner of the world.
Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people struggle to know what to do and feel very overwhelmed by the idea of what to do, or depending on where you're watching this, you could be from like a smaller community out in like deep BC or Alberta, and it's like, what can I do from where I am? And I think like that education piece is huge, you know, to take the time to study the history and learn about what has taken place here. And like start from like the seeds that can be planted in one's own mind, you know, because things can happen with action but like empty intention, and then what's the point of that?
Like choosing to not be ignorant, choosing to not look away and ignore things that don't seem to directly impact us, because I think the more movements that I'm involved in and like the more, you know, that I read and listen, the more clear it becomes that all of these things are connected. Every fight that there is for justice and equality is connected to all the other fights.
100%.
It's the same oppressors, the same structures that are enacting these acts of violence. So, you know, something that happens in the Middle East might not seem like it directly impacts us, but it does, because it's our governments, it's the taxing system, it's that same colonial playbook that's being played out. So the more people can get together, cross movement, that kind of solidarity to resist at the same time, there's so much power in the collective.
Have you read that book, How to Be an Anti-Racist?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, that framework really, if anyone has never read it, it's such a good book. Still in it, but it was really good at showing that, like, you know, that the framework was around how it is almost like a sticker, like a label you put on and off. Like, nobody wants to admit that they're a racist. The mentality or the action or the words that we've all had, you know, it's been deeply embedded, especially in how we live and navigate in this society. And so, I found that framework really illuminating to changing and shifting and seeing the ways in which, like, we have these unconscious biases, you know, and like part of that work of decolonial love towards ourselves and towards, I guess, community, is like catching ourselves on those biases when they show up. Yeah.
And then, like, I think having trusted relationships with people who will call us out, and then being receptive to that and be like, oh, okay, that was a messed up thing to say. Where did that come from? What is the belief that fuels that? And, like, really digging deeper and, like, decolonizing my own thought process.
Fully.
Yeah.
Fully. Yeah, I wanted to relate back to Taiwan for a minute. What is your connection now to the motherland?
Ooh.
Because I know you were there recently,
I was
like
there recently, yeah.
last year. And what is that like, reconnecting with?
Well, I was there December, January, so early this year technically. That was my first time there as an adult by myself. So I grew up there. I've pretty much gone every year, every other year for most of my life, but usually under the context of visiting family. And this time I like intentionally am starting to connect with my own community of artists out there. I played shows out there. I made musician friends. I made Indigenous friends. I actually spent New Year's Eve in this Indigenous village of a group of like Indigenous musicians that I met. They're like, oh, we're throwing this party in our like hometown. You should come hang out with us. So I went to this like Indigenous music celebration. There's feast and food and dancing. And that was my first time really as a Chinese settler really getting that, I don't know, like in visceral experience of being in an Indigenous community, because I'm from the north. There's not really as much of it, but when I go down to like the southeast coast, that's where like a lot of Indigenous villages are. So just being like having those conversations, having those relationships, and just understanding more the context of, okay, yeah, like I'm a settler here, we can mend these relationships, and how do I show up in a way that honors that. And I might go to China next year with my dad, so that would be the motherland for me.
Wow.
Yeah, I think a lot of Taiwanese people feel very like offended or have a very like strong reaction to the idea of being Chinese, because being Chinese or Taiwanese is such a political statement. And something in myself, as a part of my own decolonization, is not identifying with nation states. It's like these nation states are political parties. They're like a sports team. I don't have to identify with them. Yeah. I don't have to act as a white blood cell of the system and like defend it as if it's like an attack on myself and who I am as a person. I can acknowledge that my bloodline is from China. There's a land there, and I don't have to agree with the government to recognize that I have a very like a real connection with the land and the place and the culture and the people. And as I do with Taiwan, because my family has been there, I grew up there. But yeah, I think for me to be like, I'm just Taiwanese and not Chinese would be the same as white people here being like, I'm just white and not European. So, yeah.
Interesting. I didn't even check that on myself when I said that, you know, like that makes a lot of sense though. What did you learn from the Indigenous communities that you got to connect with out in Taiwan? I'm trying to imagine what they're like. You know, well, especially because the island is just north of the Philippines. Yeah. What is a line drawn around 7,000 islands, you know?
They're probably really similar
this
to, like,
is what
Filipino
I'm saying.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it's like pretty
well, I mean, like even just going to the south of Taiwan where I was in Kenting, like I'm like, these people look Filipino too, you know?
Yeah. And there's like so many different Indigenous tribes and cultures with their unique languages and customs. So I'm not just like going to homogenize them all. Like there are so many different tribes with their own cultures. But they're, from my experience, they're like such a lovely, loving people. With we visited this like carver whose father was like a carver, and he had all his like dad's like carvings, and he was telling all the different creation stories and stuff that were depicted in the carving, and some of them were really funny. There was like this one about this like couple that it's like a series of statues about like how this man was like courting this woman and then kind of like stole her clothes or something, and it's like this really funny series where they ended up getting married. But there's also like humor in that.
So that was his dating tactics? I'm gonna steal her clothes.
I don't remember exactly what the story was, but it was like funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they were so open and welcoming and wanting to share And the Taiwanese indigenous people are also like known for their music. A lot of the famous pop stars and singers in Taiwan are indigenous peoples. They're just known to be amazing singers. And a few of my friends who are Taiwanese indigenous musicians there's like a wave of young people who are now incorporating their mother tongue languages and styles of music and melodies into like more like pop, EDM, dance styles. So it's really interesting.
Cool. An exploration of other kinds of sounds to fuse into their own sounds.
It slaps. It's really good.
It slaps. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Let's do a Kirk check right now.
He's just been schmelting.
Oh, I don't want to move him. He's just like this. Fully schmelted.
He's like, yes.
Oh. Okay, Kirk's creation story. Tell us.
Kirk's
Everyone wants
story.
to know. Yes, how did Kirk come upon your life?
Oh my gosh.
How did this little wizard
Kirk,
born in a Chihuahua Yorkie body?
Well, Kirk is from Craigslist.
Good old Craig.
I don't think Craigslist allows animals to be posted anymore, but this was like back in the day when you can get animals on Craigslist. I was actually going through a really rough patch in my life. I was like 19. I was in a relationship with somebody who was just not a very healed person. I had multiple concussions at the time, so that I attribute my head injury to why I was dating this person. But anyways, I was in a really dark place in terms of my mental health. I was self-harming, I had suicidal thoughts, I had suicidal attempts, and I came out of the hospital after an incident, and I was like, okay, I need to get it together. So I ended up being like, I just need something in my life that I can pour my love into and have that reflected back to me. And somehow my conclusion was that I needed to get another dog. Because I had another dog at the time, but he was getting older. I think he was like 10 or 11. He was a bigger dog, so that's like getting up there. So I was like, okay, I need it also would be good for my dog to have young puppies. So I started Craigslist shopping, and I saw the photo, which is a terrible photo. You know when dog eyes hit light at the right angle and it turns demonic?
Yeah.
That's what he looked like. He had like demon eyes with like straggly hair. And I was like, something about you.
And he was still a puppy.
He was a tiny little puppy. Yeah, I think he was like 6 weeks old or something like that, or maybe older. I don't know. Whenever puppies are allowed to like leave their mom, but he was very tiny, and he was the last of 2 in the litter. The other one looked very much just like a Chihuahua, and it was just love at first sight. He was just like this. He was a loving baby bean, and I took him home, and we've been besties ever since.
What does Kirk teach you?
This. I aspire to be like Kirk every day.
What does that mean for anyone who doesn't know Kirk? Because I get it, but
he has this presence about him. He is so like content everywhere he goes. Everybody he meets, he shows this like love and trust towards. He's like the most unjudgmental person I've ever met.
he shares his love.
Yeah, he greets everybody he meets like he's known them his whole life, and just sits on their lap and loves them and trusts them, and is just so present. You know, he's just like attentive. He's like listening to you when you're talking to him. He loves being outside and laying in the sun and eating good food and just like being a little wizard. But he's also very attuned. Like if someone's upset, he will like go comfort them, and yeah.
Yes. Kirk, thank you for being a blessing in our lives. The only time Kirk was not content that I experienced of him is when he had to have a cone on his head. And Vanessa and I were like napping on the bed, and he would just bulldoze with his cone. He's like, get this off of me. And it was funny because it was like silent, but you could feel the energy of discontent of this cone, just how it was shoving into my face.
Yeah. And it, like sometimes we would move him and then we'd pretend that we were asleep, and he would just like loom over us with his cone. Just like stand like right here looming over us. Yeah, and if we keep ignoring him, he'll start ramming us with it.
Oh, but that's so understandable.
It is understandable.
You can't be perfect all the time, Kirk. Oh my gosh. Aw. Can we talk about Vancouver?
What about it?
I want to talk about Vancouver's arts and cultural scene. And, you know, it's a lot of people we've interviewed on this show. They are part of so many different pockets of it. And it's wild to me. Like, people would be like, oh, Vancouver's so small. Or, like, I don't know anything that's happening here. Like, Toronto's popping off. Montreal's popping off. But actually, there's so many things that happen underneath the surface. And, like, I'm still being introduced to these, like, little enclaves and niches. And especially as I'm getting older, there's now, like, the younger generation that is coming up. And, yeah, I would love to know from your end, you know, 3 artists or creatives that you're really inspired by or that you're seeing in the Vancouver scene. I should have prepared you for this beforehand.
It's interesting because, yeah, like I hear that about Vancouver, but my experience of that is I have constant FOMO. I feel like there's always something cool going on. And like the more circles I'm connected to, the more artists that I'm connected to, there's stuff happening like every day, everywhere. And you just kind of have to know where to look. And like a couple days ago, someone was like, yeah, there doesn't seem to be a lot of like art activism in Vancouver. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. There's a very unique flavor of art activism coming out of here.
I think the past few weeks especially, I've like really seen how powerful the people here are. There's some really incredible artists, activists, and community builders and organizers here. And I think we live in a privileged place because Vancouver's it's multicultural. It's probably not as diverse as Toronto. But there's something intimate about it being not a huge city. I think the circles overlap really easily. The people are becoming more and more linked, if not already. And yeah, there's some like really incredible work, and we're also privileged enough that it's a city where certain laws aren't as strictly adhered to. If you catch my drift.
Yeah.
There's like relative safety for people to be more experimental and vocal about their standings on certain things.
Yes.
That other places in the world, like, you don't have that.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you would put yourself in danger, actually.
Yeah. Like doing ceremony work and things, like that's not safe in most places in the world. And getting to do that and like being really vocally outspoken and like
even putting out a YouTube video, you know, speaking on behalf of like whatever it is that you are caring about, your thoughts and opinions. Like there's places in the world that have deep censorship on that, like jail a 16-year-old type of thing, you know?
Totally.
But yeah, back to answering the
People
question.
that I love. Well,
yeah.
First person that's really present in my mind right now is Kim Mortal, whom you've also interviewed.
Yes.
Kim is somebody that inspires me greatly, and I feel like really walks that walk of being an incredible artist in what they do, but also being really like a strong pillar in the community in what values they embody and stand up for, and knowing how to use their art in a way that serves that like greater purpose. Tanya is somebody that I've always like really looked up to, and I want to shout out the whole team at Loeb. Everybody there inspires me, and I really
Vanessa also works with Loeb.
yeah, shout out Alex.
Yeah, episode 4.
Yeah. So yeah, the whole team at Loeb, like Ado, Alex, Hannah, Kate, they all very much inspire me in the ways that they show up and the kind of space that they hold for things to grow in the community. And that's a project that I'm really excited to be a part of. And so many cool artists that come through. Like I just wrapped up residency with Ruby Singh. I think Ruby is sick.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, maybe we gotta talk to Ruby.
Talk to Ruby
I haven't heard what's
next.
been going on in a minute.
Yeah, there's another artist in residence that I just did a session with him, but he's got a couple more weeks. His name is Desmond. Oh, I can't remember his last name right now. But he's really cool. He's like Afro-Indigenous and works with like a lot of somatic therapies and like incorporates sound into those healing modalities, and he has some like great stories to tell about his families, and yeah, I think through Loeb, I'm also connecting with like a whole different scene of artists that I didn't know before, and it's exciting.
Are there any organizations or collectives that you think are doing really powerful work that you'd like to amplify or highlight?
Defense 604. I mean, Defense 604 does really cool work. Oh, my brain blank. Why is my brains blank?
Yeah. Well, you did say Loeb, which Loeb is a great one.
I love
yeah.
Loeb. Oh, there's just so many that I can't think of right now. No.
No.
There's just a monkey playing cymbals in my head.
That's what's going on.
Yeah.
Aww.
Wait, what was the question? Organizations that are doing
Yeah,
community
organizations or collectives that you think are doing important work that you'd like to amplify or highlight.
Okay, definitely Loeb and Defund. DULF, Drug Users Liberation Front. Like, yeah, as we know, like, safe access is so important here, and they're trying to keep people alive. I think that's super important work.
I think that was good.
Yeah. Okay. Three.
Yeah.
I got three in.
Three. We always
There's
like
so
to,
many more.
We like to stick with three.
There's an event on the 9th. It's for ancestral foodways. I don't. Maybe that might be the name of the organization. It may not be, but I think there's some like really interesting food sovereignty programs and like community garden, and I was working with CNH last summer.
Collingwood Neighborhood House.
Yeah, Collingwood Neighborhood House, and they have the Indigenous food gardens, and there's also one in Strathcona that are.
There's one here in this neighborhood, I think.
I don't know if that one's like meant for like Indigenous plants.
I think it is.
It is? Okay, yeah. So I didn't know about this one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like that's really important, like revitalization of like Indigenous plants and like ways of food sovereignty. Shout outs.
Three, maybe like visual artists or designers or creatives that you are inspired by.
Karina Keeling. Karina Keeling is a graphic recorder. They do incredible, but they're also like a musician and do projections.
What's graphic recording?
So you know when you go to a conference and people are talking and someone's like taking notes but in like beautiful art form and like connecting the dots through like graphics and drawings and like yeah, so that's what Karina does, but she does it with organizations that are having really important conversations in these like kind of like solidarity circles, political movements. So their work is very interesting and powerful, and I think they're an important person in the picture of collective liberation. Yeah. Okay, that's one. I don't know. Nope.
I know, I fully put you on the spot here.
Drawing a blank.
Yeah.
Well,
I actually want to tap back into, because this is a term that I've been hearing come up a lot, is actually collective liberation. What does that mean to you?
I think it's kind of drawing on the point that we mentioned earlier of how all these movements are connected. So land back movements here are connected to all the other land back movements around the world. Environmental work is very interconnected to land back and food sovereignty and returning to like more indigenous stewards of the land, because as we know, most of our environmental problems are like colonial structure problems and capitalism problems and injustice and inequity problems. So I think that's how I perceive that collective liberation of when we uplift the poor, like people who are the most oppressed and suffering from these issues, we actually free ourselves at the same time, because like, you know, we're like kind of like middle privileged enough to be comfortable, but like if anything tragic happened to us, we would like really need help kind of deal. So anybody in that position, we're actually not in the top percentage of people. So if we can focus our energy in helping uplift and address issues that are devastating and like killing the poorest people or the most vulnerable people in the world, it's just as much helping ourselves. So we all do it. for each other and our world, and yeah.
Thank you for explaining that.
That's just what it means to me. I'm not a dictionary.
I'm pretty sure this last hour, I feel like you are a dictionary.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh,
I'm reading this book
Kirk.
right now.
Yes, tell us.
By it's on my nightstand. It's
Yeah.
by Aurora Levins Morales.
Mm-hmm.
She is a Puerto Rican Jewish writer, and she talks a lot about cross-movement solidarity and collective liberation. So I've been chipping away at this book for a few months now, just like really digesting each chapter. And it's called Medicine Stories, Essays for Radicals. So it's like a collective of like thoughts and reflections from her involvement with many different social movements, from feminism to Puerto Rican women, and writing history from the perspective of the people who weren't captured in history written by the white men, or their history written by the powerful people, and how can we shift our view of our society now when we actually look at the history through the lens of the people who are kind of left out of those stories in our textbooks.
Fully. Yeah, it's not the whole picture. We're coming close to the end of our time to wrap it up. Jamal was doing this signal. He's never done that before. I don't know what that means. If he's hungry.
Time to eat.
Or I should eat. I don't know. But I would love to end this live stream talking a bit about, what is, your dream or aspiration for yourself, and what you want to create or what you want to do.
Number one thing I want to create is space. I feel like it's really, this year especially, I really felt like this hustle, and I feel this like collective burnout from everybody that I talk to of like, we're just doing so much all the time, and it's like not sustainable.
Feel you on that.
Yeah, especially people working in the arts. Like, we don't clock out. We're always creating something, we're practicing, or like doing admin work, or it's not like we, like clock in, clock out, we go home and we can just chill. There's always like going on. So I think I want to create more space for myself to take on less projects, be more intentional about what I take on, leaving space for things that emerge in the flow of life, and trusting that will happen. I feel like I've like, you got a buggy in your nose?
It went right in!
It's okay, it came back out. I saw it.
You saw it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, why did you target me, fly?
Is that what Jamal was foreshadowing?
Oh my gosh. We're not going to edit that out, but we're just going to pretend it didn't happen. Continue.
What was I saying?
Space. I love where you're going with that.
Yeah. Just trusting that, like, the people who are meant to know who I am and what I do will and or already do, and when the right projects align and I'm the person for it, it will find me, rather than like this like scarcity of like constantly feeling like I have to like go out and apply for stuff and grind, because like I did that. I did a good portion of that, and just like pulling back a little bit and figuring out leaving more space to read books and learn and research and nerd out on stuff on my own time feels like, rather than being like, oh, I can't read these books I really want to read because I have to do X, Y, Z. But in terms of artistic creative work, what I really want to create next year is installations, like public installations, public art, interactive things that are essentially kind of social experiments. So I'm excited to like work with Loeb. I'm excited what I did at Wet Lab this September, and just like I'm taking a course in SFU next year that's kind of about like site-specific immersive installations.
Ooh,
so that's something that I'm really
juicy.
excited in. Yeah. How can we activate spaces and have people come in and explore a lot of these concepts like collective liberation and solidarity through interacting with an art piece? And how can I bring my visual art practice and music and movement and the things that I know about those things together and make different artists to have these more like embodied experience for like a wider audience of people in public spaces.
Yes, sis.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's going to be next year, but I think like this like coming season, I'm opening myself to create space to like let those things happen.
Aw, I'm so glad we got to talk, honestly, especially in this like day to day and in this moment, it feels really nice and comforting to be able to speak to such a good friend, and also to create the space for you to also just like share what's on your heart, on your mind, where you've gone and where you want to go. And I think that's so valuable, that what you're aspiring or what you are dreaming of right now is like, it feels like a very restful but radical action, which like a lot of people, when they talk about goals and dreams, it's always like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And you're like, I want to just so that the next thing can come right in.
And I also want to deepen with the things that I already have. I want to deepen my practice and get to know my crafts and instruments, so then I can utilize them better when I do make something.
I'm on that wave too.
Yeah.
Intimacy and deepen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like less, but like stronger within those like fewer things.
Yeah. I feel that. Aw. Well, who has just joined us? It's done. You've missed it. You're going to have to do the replay. But we have been sitting here for the last hour with my dear, beautiful friend, Vanessa, aka LeFan. We've had a really great conversation about art, about her story, about the earth, about life. And yeah, thank you for tuning in. And thank you, little Kirk, for continuing to be our most amazing bud, emotional support system here. Yeah. Where can people find you? How can we stay in touch?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm everywhere on the internet.
Yeah.
You can find me on Instagram or Facebook, although Facebook I'm leaning off of. I have a TikTok channel and a YouTube channel that aren't the most used.
Yeah.
But you can find me there. I have a website that is also out of date.
Yeah. It's hard to keep up with all the things.
There's so many of them, and it's just me, myself, and I.
Yeah, no.
It's one of the artist struggles, you know, if we're not playing and practicing, we're like trying to keep up with all our like social platforms that actually censor us and don't like us very much, so it's hard.
It's hard out here on the internet too. So it's at Van_LeFan.
I think if you Google just Van LeFan, any of it will come up. The underscore only applies to TikTok and Instagram.
There you go.
But yeah, I don't think there's another Van LeFan out there.
There better not be. Yeah. I'm just joking. You could be you. Yeah, so thank you for tuning in. My name is Kazi. This is Van LeFan. This is Captain Kirk. And you have been watching Vancity Beats, Eats, and more. Zoom in on that face. Zoom in on that face. Ah! Kirk's like, what's going on? Please stop. No!